In a quiet suburban dining room, a 75-year-old grandmother was about to face devastating humiliation. What started as a family dinner took a shocking turn when she encountered her son's fiancé's cruel dismissal. Zuri Hayden wasn't your typical retiree. For 3 years, she had secretly built a digital empire, known for her viral content that captivated millions. When Jessica called her ancient, Zuri had no idea she was about to unleash a revelation that would shatter every assumption. Her decision to reveal her at Grandma's Pilsty identity would expose hidden prejudices and transform relationships forever. What began as welcoming a new family member became a powerful lesson about respect and hidden potential. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ring lights hummed softly in the converted spare bedroom, casting a warm glow across Zuri Hayden's face as she adjusted the camera angle one final time. At 75, her movements were deliberate but swift, her fingers dancing across the touchscreen, with the confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours perfecting her craft. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the quiet widow who shuffled around her empty house in slippers and a faded housecoat. In her place stood at Grandma's Pilsty, complete with carefully applied makeup, a vintage apron that had belonged to her mother, and an energy that seemed to knock decades off her age. "Well, hello there, my beautiful souls," she said to the camera, her voice carrying the warmth and authority that had once commanded high school classrooms. "It's your girl Zuri, and today we're going to talk about something that's been weighing on my heart." She paused, letting her eyes crinkle with the hint of mischief that had made her a favorite among her 2 million followers. "Dating after 60, and honey, let me tell you, it's a jungle out there." The comments began flooding in immediately, hearts and fire emojis cascading down the screen like digital confetti. Zuri had learned to read them while she cooked, her peripheral vision catching the words of encouragement, the shared stories, the desperate pleas for advice from women half her age, who somehow found wisdom in her weathered hands and knowing smile. "Now I know what you're thinking," she continued, pulling out a worn wooden spoon that had stirred countless family meals. "What does this old bird know about modern romance?" Well, let me tell you something. The heart doesn't get a senior discount, and neither does loneliness. Her voice caught slightly on the last word, a moment of vulnerability that her followers had come to treasure. It was these glimpses of genuine emotion that separated her from the polished influencers, who filled their feeds with perfect lives and carefully curated content. The kitchen island before her was set up like a professional studio. 2 ring lights flanked the cooking area, their soft illumination eliminating harsh shadows. A small teleprompter, a recent investment she'd researched for weeks, sat just out of frame, though she rarely needed it anymore. Her phone, mounted on a flexible arm, captured every gesture, every expression, every moment of authenticity that had somehow resonated with millions of strangers across the globe. "Today's recipe is my grandmother's sweet potato casserole," she announced, her hands already moving with practiced efficiency. "But this isn't just about cooking, darlings. This is about nourishment. Feeding your soul when the world tries to tell you your best days are behind you." She reached for the sweet potatoes, their orange flesh catching the light. "These beauties have been through some heat, got a little wrinkled, maybe not as pretty as they used to be, but trust me, they're at their sweetest right now." The metaphor wasn't lost on her audience. The comments exploded with crying emojis, hearts, and personal stories. User @Sunshine@62 wrote, "Zuri, you literally saved my life. I was ready to give up on love after my divorce, but your videos reminded me I still have so much to offer." Another comment from @GensButLoveGrandmas read, "My actual grandmother died last year and your videos helped me feel connected to her memory. Thank you for being everyone's internet grandma." Zuri's eyes softened as she read the messages streaming past. This was why she'd started this journey 3 years ago, during those long, empty months when the silence in her house felt like a physical presence. Her husband Robert's absence had been a wound that wouldn't heal, leaving her adrift in a world that seemed to have little place for a 72-year-old widow. The idea of making videos had come to her during a particularly dark February night, when the loneliness had driven her to scroll through social media until dawn, searching for some connection, some reminder that she still existed. "Now, while these are baking," she said, sliding the casserole into the oven with a flourish, "let's talk about something that's been on my mind. I got a message from a young woman, let's call her Ashley, who's 28 and convinced her dating life is over because she's not 22 anymore. Zuri shook her head, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Baby girl, you haven't even gotten started yet. At 28, you're still figuring out who you are. At 75, I'm just getting interesting. The comments section erupted with laughter emojis and agreement. At middle-aged and fabulous wrote, Zuri spitting facts as usual. I'm 45 and feel like I'm hitting my stride. Someone else added, at 33, I needed to hear this. You're the wisdom we all need. But it was the comment from @ChefFrank78 that made Zuri's heart skip a beat. Beautiful as always, Zuri. Your grandmother's recipe sounds amazing. Mine used to make something similar, with a secret ingredient, a dash of bourbon. Maybe we should collaborate on a video sometime? Frank Rodriguez had been commenting on her videos for months, his own cooking channel boasting nearly 500,000 subscribers. Their online friendship had blossomed into something that made Zuri feel like a teenager again, checking her phone for his messages, staying up late to watch his latest videos, even practicing her responses to his comments before posting them. At 78, he was 3 years her senior, a retired chef from San Antonio whose wife had passed 5 years ago. Their virtual relationship had become one of the bright spots in her week, though she'd never admitted it to anyone. Oh, Frank's in the house, she said to the camera, unable to hide her grin. For those who don't know, Frank makes the most incredible Mexican fusion dishes. We've been talking about doing a collaboration, maybe a cross-cultural cooking challenge? She winked at the camera. Stay tuned for that, loves. The timer chimed, and Zuri pulled the casserole from the oven, the sweet aroma filling the small space. The golden brown surface was perfectly caramelized, the marshmallows on top toasted to perfection. She'd made this dish hundreds of times, but something about sharing it with her online family made it feel special again. There we have it, she announced, holding the dish toward the camera. Sweet potato casserole with a side of life wisdom. Remember, my beautiful souls, age is just a number, but wisdom? That's earned through every wrinkle, every heartbreak, every moment of joy that life throws our way. As she spoke, her phone buzzed with a text from her son Marcus. Mom, just wanted to confirm dinner tomorrow night. 6 p.m.? Can't wait for you to meet Jessica. She's excited to finally meet the woman who raised me. Zuri's stomach tightened slightly. Tomorrow night would be the first time she met Marcus's fiancée, a 28-year-old marketing executive he'd been dating for 8 months. From what she'd gathered, Jessica was ambitious, driven, and completely focused on her career. Marcus had been careful with his descriptions, but Zuri had caught the undertone of concern in his voice when he mentioned Jessica's thoughts on, quote, traditional family values and her views on retirement. That's going to wrap up today's video, darlings, she said, her voice maintaining its warm tone despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Remember, life doesn't stop at any age, it just gets more interesting. Keep spilling that tea, and keep being your beautiful, authentic selves. She ended the recording and immediately began her transformation back into regular Zuri. The ring lights clicked off, casting the room into ordinary afternoon light. She removed her apron, wiped off her carefully applied makeup, and began the process of hiding all evidence of her secret life. The camera went into its protective case stored in the back of her closet. The lights collapsed into compact stands that fit behind her winter coats. The backdrop, a cheerful kitchen scene she'd created with removable wallpaper, rolled up and slid under her bed. Within 20 minutes, the spare bedroom looked like any other room in the house of a 75-year-old woman. The only hint of her double life was the faint scent of makeup remover and the satisfied smile that lingered on her lips as she checked the early metrics on her video. Already the views were climbing, 5,000 in the first 10 minutes. The comments were pouring in faster than she could read them, each one a small reminder that somewhere in the world, someone felt a little less alone because of her words. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd started making videos to combat her own loneliness, and somehow she'd accidentally become a beacon for others struggling with the same feelings. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from TikTok. The video had hit 50,000 views in 30 minutes, well on its way to joining the ranks of her most popular content. She'd learned to predict which videos would go viral. The ones where she was most vulnerable, most honest about her struggles and fears, seemed to resonate most deeply with her audience. But even as pride swelled in her chest, a familiar shadow of doubt crept in. What would Marcus think if he knew? What would Jessica think when she met the woman she assumed was just another elderly mother, probably struggling with technology and out of touch with modern life? Zuri had spent decades as a high school principal, commanding respect from teenagers and adults alike. She'd raised 2 successful children, built a 30-year marriage, and now managed a social media empire that most people half her age would envy. Yet somehow, she couldn't shake the feeling that her family saw her as diminished, as someone who needed protection rather than recognition. The decision to keep her online success secret had started as a way to avoid seeming undignified, but it had evolved into something more complex, a test of whether her value as a person was tied to her age or her accomplishments. The sweet potato casserole sat cooling on the counter, a tangible reminder of the bridge between her 2 worlds. Tomorrow night, she'd serve it to Marcus and Jessica, and they'd compliment her cooking without knowing that millions of people around the world had watched her make it, had found comfort in her words, had been inspired by her resilience. She picked up her phone one more time, scrolling through the comments that continued to pour in. Each heart emoji, each word of gratitude, each personal story shared in response to her vulnerability was a reminder that she had something valuable to offer the world. The question was whether she'd ever be brave enough to share that truth with the people who mattered most. As evening settled over her quiet neighborhood, Zuri Hayden, high school principal, widow, mother, and secret social media sensation, prepared for bed with the satisfaction of another day spent touching lives across the globe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to connect, and, perhaps, if she was brave enough, new chances to bridge the gap between who she was and who the world expected her to be. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the doorbell, Jessica's perfectly manicured fingers intertwined with his. The weight of this moment pressed against his chest. His mother meeting the woman he planned to marry, 2 worlds colliding in the familiar sanctuary of his childhood home. He'd spent the drive over coaching Jessica on his mother's quirks, her tendency to ask too many questions, her old-fashioned ways that sometimes made him cringe in mixed company. "Remember, she's been alone since Dad died," he'd said, stealing glances at Jessica's reflection in the passenger window as she touched up her lipstick. "She might seem a little out of touch with things. Technology, social media, that whole world you live in. Just be patient with her." Jessica had nodded, her smile tight with the kind of practiced politeness she reserved for client meetings and networking events. At 28, she commanded respect in boardrooms filled with executives twice her age. But something about meeting Marcus's mother made her feel like she was 17 again, desperate to prove she belonged. The door opened before Marcus could press the bell, revealing Zuri in a soft blue cardigan and pearls that had belonged to her own mother. Her silver hair was styled in gentle waves, and her makeup was subtle but expertly applied, though neither Marcus nor Jessica would have guessed she'd learned her techniques from YouTube tutorials that regularly garnered hundreds of thousands of views. "There's my handsome boy," Zuri said, her voice carrying the warmth that had once made teenage troublemakers confess their secrets in her principal's office. She embraced Marcus with the fierce love of a mother who'd worried through every scraped knee and broken heart, then turned to Jessica with genuine curiosity. "And you must be Jessica. I've heard so much about you, dear." Jessica's handshake was firm, professional, the kind that closed deals and commanded attention. "Mrs. Hayden, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you constantly." The words were perfectly chosen, but something in her tone suggested she found Marcus's devotion to his mother slightly excessive for a man of 45. "Please, call me Zuri. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The house enveloped them in the scent of roasting chicken and fresh bread, but it was the subtle details that told the real story. The way Zuri moved through her space with quiet confidence, the carefully curated family photos that chronicled decades of love and loss, the bookshelf filled with titles ranging from classic literature to modern psychology texts. A casual observer might have seen the home of a typical elderly woman, but the truth was far more complex. "Can I get you something to drink?" Zuri asked, leading them into the living room where she'd set out a spread of appetizers that looked like they belonged in a magazine. "I have wine, tea, coffee, or I just made some fresh lemonade." Wine would be lovely, Jessica said, settling onto the couch with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being watched. Her eyes swept the room, taking inventory with the sharp assessment of a marketing professional. She noted the slightly outdated furniture, the abundance of family photos, the small television that probably couldn't stream anything more sophisticated than basic cable. As Zuri bustled in the kitchen, Jessica leaned toward Marcus. "She's sweet," she murmured, her voice carrying the tone one might use to describe a particularly charming pet. "Very traditional." Marcus felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Defensiveness, maybe, or the ghost of childhood loyalty. "She's actually really sharp," he said quietly. "She was a high school principal for 30 years, dealt with kids, parents, school boards. She's tougher than she looks." "Oh, I'm sure she was great at her job," Jessica replied, her smile bright and dismissive. "It's just so different from what we do now, you know? The world has changed so much since then." When Zuri returned with drinks, she settled into her favorite chair with the ease of someone comfortable in her own skin. "So Jessica, Marcus tells me you work in marketing. That must be exciting work." "It is," Jessica said, her posture straightening as she shifted into professional mode. "I specialize in social media strategy and influencer partnerships. It's a rapidly evolving field. You really have to stay on top of every new platform, every algorithm change. The pace is incredible." Zuri nodded thoughtfully, her expression one of polite interest. "That sounds fascinating. I imagine it must be challenging to connect with different audiences." "Exactly," Jessica said, warming to her subject. "It's all about understanding demographics, engagement patterns, what content resonates with which age groups. Like, someone my age knows instinctively what works on TikTok or Instagram, but it's completely foreign to—" She paused, her eyes flickering to Zuri's face. "Well, to people who didn't grow up with technology." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the subtle condescension in Jessica's tone even as he struggled to find a way to address it without creating tension. "I suppose that's true," Zuri said carefully, her years of managing difficult conversations serving her well. "Though I've always found that people are more adaptable than we give them credit for." "Oh, absolutely," Jessica agreed, her voice taking on the patient tone one might use with a child. "I mean, it's adorable how some older people try to use social media. My grandmother is always accidentally posting things to her story instead of sending them privately. It's so cute." The word cute landed like a small slap. Zuri's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, but Marcus caught it. The same expression she'd worn when dealing with particularly challenging parents during his school years. "Dinner's ready," Zuri announced, rising with fluid grace. "I hope you're hungry." The dining room table was set with her mother's china, candles flickering in crystal holders that had been wedding gifts 47 years ago. The presentation was flawless. Roasted chicken with herbs, the sweet potato casserole that had earned her 60,000 comments just hours earlier, green beans almondine, and fresh rolls that filled the room with their warm fragrance. "This looks incredible," Marcus said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. "Mom, you've outdone yourself." "It's beautiful, Mrs. Zuri," Jessica corrected herself. "Very homey. I usually just order takeout. I'm so busy with work I barely have time to cook." "Cooking can be very therapeutic," Zuri said, passing the serving dishes. "There's something satisfying about creating something nourishing with your own hands." "I'm sure it is," Jessica replied, her tone suggesting she found the concept quaint, but ultimately irrelevant. "Though honestly, with grocery delivery and meal kits, I'm not sure why anyone bothers anymore. Time is money, you know?" As they ate, the conversation meandered through safe topics. Marcus's work, Jessica's latest campaign, the weather. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Jessica's comments grew increasingly pointed, each observation a small needle designed to establish her superiority in the modern world. "Marcus was telling me about your neighborhood," Jessica said, cutting her chicken into precise portions. "It must be nice to have so much stability. Everything probably looks exactly the same as when you moved in." "Some things have changed," Zuri replied evenly. "New families, new energy. Change can be good when it brings fresh perspectives." "Absolutely," Jessica agreed. Though I imagine it's hard for people your age to keep up with how fast everything moves now. Like, the technology alone, smartphones, social media, streaming services. It must feel overwhelming. Marcus finally found his voice. Actually, Mom's pretty good with technology. She texts, uses email, even has a smartphone. Jessica's laugh was light but patronizing. That's wonderful. Baby steps, right? I mean, my grandmother thinks she's tech-savvy because she can use Facebook. It's so sweet how proud they get of the little things. The sweet potato casserole suddenly tasted like ash in Zuri's mouth. She'd spent 3 years building a digital empire, connecting with millions of people across generations, creating content that inspired and entertained. Just hours ago, she'd been reading comments from viewers who called her work life-changing, who credited her with helping them through difficult times, who saw her as a source of wisdom and humor. I think older people bring a lot of value to, well, everything, Marcus said weakly, his discomfort evident in every word. Of course they do, Jessica said quickly. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just that the world has moved so far beyond what they knew. Like, I can't imagine trying to navigate dating apps or social media or even online shopping at that age. It would be terrifying. Some people are more adaptable than others, Zuri said, her voice carrying an edge that Marcus recognized from his teenage years, the tone that preceded serious consequences. Oh, I'm sure, Jessica replied, oblivious to the warning signs. But let's be realistic. Someone who's, 75? They probably learned to use a computer when they were already retirement age. It's not their fault they can't keep up with things like TikTok and Instagram. Different generations, different skill sets. The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Marcus felt the familiar weight of being caught between two important women in his life, his natural peacekeeping instincts warring with a growing awareness that Jessica's comments were crossing lines he hadn't even realized existed. Actually, Zuri said, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. I think you might be surprised by what some people are capable of. I'm sure I would be, Jessica agreed, completely missing the subtle challenge in Zuri's tone. But honestly, at a certain age, wouldn't it be better to just, focus on enjoying retirement? Maybe spend time with people your own age. Do activities that are more age-appropriate. The suggestion hung in the air like a verdict. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he recognized the implication that his mother was somehow out of place in the modern world, that her value diminished with each passing year. Age-appropriate, Zuri repeated slowly, as if testing the words. That's an interesting phrase. You know what I mean, Jessica said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with difficult clients. Like, maybe a nice senior center, activities designed for people with similar experiences. It might be more comfortable than trying to keep up with a world that's moved beyond. Beyond what? Zuri asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Well, beyond what you knew when you were working, Jessica said, apparently oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. I mean, let's face it, the world today is nothing like the world you grew up in. Technology, social media, the pace of change. It's probably overwhelming for someone who's, ancient by today's standards. The word ancient hit Zuri like a physical blow. She'd been called many things in her 75 years. Strict, fair, passionate, demanding, but never ancient. Never irrelevant. Never a relic of a bygone era that the world had moved beyond. Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. Jessica, I'm just being honest, Jessica interrupted, her voice carrying the self-righteousness of someone who believed brutal honesty was a virtue. Marcus, you're always worrying about your mother, making sure she's okay, that she's not too lonely. Maybe she'd be happier somewhere with people who understand her generation, who share her limitations. The room fell silent, except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Zuri looked at her son, saw the conflict written across his face, the way he struggled to find words that wouldn't hurt either of the women he loved. In that moment, she realized that Marcus, despite his protestations, shared at least some of Jessica's assumptions about her capabilities. I see, Zuri said finally, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once silenced rowdy classrooms. Well, Jessica, I appreciate your honesty. It's always illuminating to learn how others perceive us. She rose from her chair with the dignity of a woman who had faced down angry parents, hostile school boards, and the crushing loneliness of widowhood. I think I'll clear the table. Marcus, why don't you show Jessica those photo albums she might find? Age appropriate. As she gathered the dishes, her movements precise and controlled, Zuri's mind raced through possibilities. In her bedroom, her phone was probably buzzing with notifications from her latest video. Comments from viewers who found her inspiring, relevant, vital. Messages from Frank, whose own success had proved that age was just a number. Responses from young people who saw her as a mentor, a bridge between generations rather than a relic of the past. The contrast was stark and painful. Here, in her own home, she was seen as ancient, irrelevant, a burden to be managed. Online, she was at Grandma's Bilsti, a voice of wisdom and humor that resonated across generations. The question was whether she had the courage to bridge those two worlds, to show Jessica and Marcus who she really was. As she stood at the sink, washing dishes that had been in her family for generations, Zuri made a decision that would change everything. The ancient woman they saw was about to show them exactly what this generation was capable of. But first, she needed to finish playing the role they expected. The transformation would come later, when she was ready to shatter every assumption they'd made about her worth, her relevance, and her place in the modern world. The real Zuri Hayden was about to make her debut. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10 times as Zuri finally closed the front door behind Marcus and Jessica. Their goodbyes had been stilted, awkward, Marcus apologizing with his eyes while Jessica maintained her bright smile, apparently oblivious to the damage she'd inflicted. The silence that followed their departure pressed against Zuri's chest like a physical weight. She stood in her foyer for a long moment, her hand still on the doorknob, processing the evening's events. The word ancient echoed in her mind, each repetition like a fresh wound. In 75 years, she'd weathered many storms: the death of her parents, the challenges of raising 2 children largely alone while Robert worked long hours, the devastating loss of her husband 2 years ago. But somehow, being dismissed so completely by someone who should have been family cut deeper than she'd expected. Her phone buzzed from the kitchen counter where she'd left it during dinner. The notification light blinked insistently, and she knew without looking that her latest video was probably gaining momentum. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Jessica had been explaining why people her age couldn't possibly understand modern technology, thousands of people across the globe were engaging with content she'd created, finding value in her words, seeking her wisdom. Zuri retrieved her phone and climbed the stairs to her bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. The familiar ritual of removing her pearls and changing into her nightgown usually brought comfort, but tonight, it felt like shedding armor she desperately needed to keep wearing. When she finally looked at her phone, the numbers made her catch her breath. Her sweet potato casserole video had exploded, 750,000 views and climbing, with comments pouring in faster than she could read them. The engagement was extraordinary, even by her standards. Hearts, fire emojis, and lengthy responses from viewers sharing their own stories of resilience and reinvention. At Soul Searching 45 had written, "Zuri, your video came at exactly the right time. I'm 42 and just got divorced, feeling like my life is over. But watching you thrive at 75 gives me hope that my best days might still be ahead of me." At College Struggling 22 added, "My grandmother died last year, and I've been so lost. Your wisdom feels like a hug from her. Thank you for showing us that getting older doesn't mean getting less amazing." But it was a comment from @TechBro29 that made her pause. "Honestly, my girlfriend's grandmother is about your age and she can barely use a flip phone. It's incredible how tech-savvy and relevant you are. You're literally more engaging than most influencers half your age." The cruel irony hit her like a slap. Here was a 29-year-old man praising her technological competence and relevance, while Jessica, nearly the same age, had spent the evening explaining why people like her couldn't possibly understand the modern world. Zuri sank onto her bed, scrolling through hundreds of comments from people who saw her as inspiring, current, vital. The contrast with the evening's humiliation was almost too much to bear. She began typing a response to some of the comments, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the touchscreen. "Thank you all for the love on today's video," she wrote to @SoulSearching45. "Remember, sweet potato, Life doesn't have expiration dates on dreams. Sometimes our greatest adventures begin when we least expect them. But as she typed, Jessica's voice echoed in her mind. Ancient, overwhelming, age-appropriate. The words felt like prison bars, trying to contain her in a box labeled elderly and irrelevant. Her thumb hovered over the camera icon. She could make a video right now, address Jessica's comments directly. The script practically wrote itself. A pointed response about assumptions, about the danger of writing people off based on age, about the vibrant community of older adults thriving in digital spaces. She could craft it with surgical precision, delivering the message with the same grace and authority that had made her successful online. She started recording, her voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. Hello, my beautiful souls. It's late, but I needed to talk to you about something that's been weighing on my heart tonight. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Today, someone close to my family made some comments about people my age, about how we're out of touch, how we can't keep up with the modern world, how we'd be better off with people our own age, doing age-appropriate activities. The words felt good coming out, each one a small act of rebellion against the box Jessica had tried to put her in. She could picture the comments this would generate, the support from her community, the validation that would counter the evening's pain. I want to talk about what it means to be ancient in a world that worships youth, about the assumptions people make when they see gray hair and wrinkles, about the vitality that exists in every generation. She stopped recording, her finger hovering over the delete button. Something held her back. Not fear, exactly, but a deeper consideration of consequences. This video would be seen by millions. It would generate discussion, debate, possibly even media attention, and eventually it might reach Jessica, or Marcus, or someone else in her family. The thought sent a chill through her. What would happen when her secret was exposed? When the family that saw her as a sweet, somewhat helpless elderly woman discovered that she commanded an audience of millions, that she was more digitally savvy than most people half her age, that while they'd been worrying about her loneliness, she'd been building a thriving online community. She deleted the video and started again, this time with a different approach. My beautiful souls, tonight I want to talk about something that affects all of us. The moments when the world makes us feel small, when people make assumptions about what we're capable of based on how we look or how old we are. This version felt safer, more general. She could address the pain without revealing the specific source, could speak to the universal experience of being underestimated without exposing family drama to public scrutiny. But, as she spoke, another wave of anger washed over her. Why should she protect Jessica's feelings? Why should she hide her accomplishments to spare the sensibilities of someone who'd been so casually cruel? Jessica worked in social media marketing. She understood the power of influence, the value of engagement, the difficulty of building an authentic online presence. If she discovered that the ancient woman she'd dismissed was actually more successful in her field than she was, maybe it would teach her something about assumptions. Zuri deleted the second video and began a third, her voice carrying an edge that her followers had rarely heard. Tonight, someone told me I was ancient, that I should stick to age-appropriate activities with people my own age. They suggested I was out of touch, that the modern world had moved beyond what I could understand. Her eyes blazed with quiet fury. I'm making this video to show you what ancient looks like in 2024. She held up her phone, showing the screen with its 1 million followers. This is what out of touch looks like. This is what irrelevant looks like. This is what happens when someone ancient decides to engage with the modern world, instead of accepting the limitations others try to place on her. The video was powerful, raw, and completely devastating. It would destroy Jessica professionally and personally, expose her prejudices to the world, and serve as a masterclass in why assumptions based on age were dangerous. Zuri's finger hovered over the post button, the sweet taste of revenge just a tap away. But then she remembered Robert's voice, the way he'd always counseled patience when she was ready to tear into a particularly problematic parent or student. Take a breath, Zuri, he'd say. When you're angry, you make decisions you can't take back. Sleep on it. The problem will still be there in the morning, but you'll see it more clearly. She saved the video as a draft instead of posting it, then set her phone aside. The comments on her earlier video continued to pour in, each one a reminder of the positive impact she had on people's lives. But alongside the joy of connection came the pain of being so thoroughly misunderstood by her own family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her phone rang, Carmen's name appearing on the screen. Zuri's daughter had always been intuitive, somehow knowing when her mother needed support. "Mom? How did dinner go with Marcus and Jessica?" Zuri's throat tightened. "It was interesting." "That doesn't sound good. What happened?" "Oh, just some differences in perspective," Zuri said, not ready to share the full extent of Jessica's cruelty. "She's very focused on her career, very ambitious. I think she sees me as rather old-fashioned." "Old-fashioned?" Carmen's voice carried the same protective edge that had emerged when playground bullies targeted her younger brother decades ago. "Mom, you're one of the most adaptable people I know. You've reinvented yourself completely since Dad died." The words hit closer to home than Carmen could possibly know. Zuri had indeed reinvented herself, but in ways her daughter couldn't imagine. The successful social media presence, the viral videos, the community of millions who found value in her content. All of it hidden behind the assumption that a 75-year-old woman couldn't possibly understand the digital world. "I suppose I have," Zuri said carefully, "though I'm not sure everyone sees it that way." "Well, then they're not looking hard enough," Carmen said firmly. "You want to know what I think? I think some people are threatened by older adults who don't fit their narrow expectations. They want to put us in boxes: grandmotherly, traditional, out of touch. It makes them feel better about their own relevance." The insight was more accurate than Carmen realized. Jessica's comments had indeed felt like an attempt to diminish Zuri's relevance, to establish a hierarchy where youth automatically trumped experience, where technological fluency was the sole measure of worth. "Maybe you're right," Zuri said, glancing at her phone where notifications continued to appear. "Maybe some people need to have their assumptions challenged." "Exactly. And if Jessica can't see how amazing you are, that's her loss. Marcus will figure it out eventually." After ending the call, Zuri sat in the darkness of her bedroom, surrounded by the quiet hum of her secret digital empire. Her laptop was closed, but she knew that behind its sleeping screen lay editing software, analytics dashboards, collaboration tools, and communication platforms that connected her to people around the world. The same technology Jessica had implied was beyond her comprehension. She opened her laptop and navigated to her TikTok analytics. The numbers were staggering. Not just the follower count, but the engagement rates, the demographics, the global reach of her content. Her audience spanned continents and generations, with viewers from 18 to 85 finding value in her videos. The comment sections were filled with gratitude, wisdom-seeking, and genuine connection. In the marketing world Jessica inhabited, these numbers represented serious influence, real power, substantial earning potential. Brands paid millions for the kind of authentic engagement Zuri had built organically. Her demographic data showed reach that most marketers could only dream of achieving. The irony was delicious and bitter in equal measure. While Jessica had been explaining why people Zuri's age couldn't understand modern marketing, Zuri had been quietly mastering it, building the kind of authentic brand presence that marketing executives struggled to create for their clients. She opened the draft video she'd created earlier, watching her own face as she delivered the devastating response to Jessica's comments. The video was perfect, powerful, dignified, and utterly destroying, but something about it felt wrong, like using a nuclear weapon to win a family argument. Instead, she began typing a different kind of response. Not a video, but a direct message to Frank Rodriguez, her fellow creator and the one person who might understand the complexity of her situation. "Frank, I need some advice. Someone close to my family made some hurtful comments tonight about people our age being out of touch and irrelevant. I'm tempted to show them exactly how wrong they are, but I'm not sure that's the right approach. What would you do? His response came quickly, despite the late hour. Zuri, I've been there. My own son used to help me with my phone like I was incompetent. The truth has a way of coming out eventually. Sometimes the best revenge is just continuing to be amazing and letting people discover their assumptions were wrong. But if someone is being cruel, don't let them diminish your light to spare their feelings. The message was wise, but it didn't resolve her central dilemma. She had built something remarkable, something that brought joy to millions, and contradicted every assumption Jessica had made about her capabilities. The question was whether she had the courage to reveal it, knowing that the revelation would change everything, not just Jessica's perception, but her entire family's understanding of who she was. Zuri closed her laptop and prepared for bed, but sleep felt impossible. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether to remain in the box others had built for her, or step fully into the power she'd created for herself. The decision would define not just her relationship with Jessica, but her relationship with herself and the world she'd built online. As she lay in the darkness, her phone continued to buzz with notifications from people who saw her as inspiring, relevant, and vital. The contrast with her evening's humiliation was stark and painful. Somewhere in the space between those two realities lay the truth she was still learning to embrace: that her worth wasn't determined by others' perceptions, but by her own choices and actions. The ancient woman Jessica had dismissed was about to make a choice that would change everything. The only question was whether she had the courage to make it. The morning sun filtered through Zuri's bedroom curtains, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floor, where she knelt beside her bed, searching for the phone charger that had somehow migrated under the nightstand during the night. She'd barely slept, tossing between dreams of confrontation and moments of stark wakefulness, where Jessica's voice echoed in her mind like a broken record. Ancient, out of touch, age-appropriate. Her phone had died sometime around 3 a.m., finally succumbing to the constant stream of notifications from her viral video. The silence had been both a relief and a source of anxiety. She was curious about the response, but also dreading the emotional weight of reading thousands of comments while still processing her own hurt. The doorbell rang as she finally located the charger, its familiar chime sending a spike of anxiety through her chest. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after last night's dinner, she wasn't sure she had the emotional energy for visitors. Through the front window, she could see Marcus's car in the driveway, and her heart performed a complicated dance between relief and apprehension. "Mom?" Marcus's voice carried through the door, accompanied by the sound of his key in the lock. "I brought you some coffee from that place you like." She found him in the kitchen, setting a paper cup on the counter with the careful attention of someone bearing an apology gift. His face was drawn with the exhaustion of a sleepless night, and she recognized the expression he'd worn as a child when he'd done something he knew was wrong. "You didn't have to do that," she said, accepting the coffee with a small smile. "But, thank you. I wanted to talk about last night." Marcus rubbed his face, leaving red marks along his cheekbones. Jessica. She didn't mean to sound so harsh. She's just really passionate about her work, and sometimes she gets a little carried away when she's talking about generational differences in technology. Zuri studied her son's face, noting the way his eyes couldn't quite meet hers. "Is that what you think happened? She got carried away?" "I think she was trying to make conversation about something she knows well, and maybe it came out wrong." Marcus's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who'd rehearsed this explanation. "You know how it is with people in marketing? They're always thinking about demographics and target audiences. It's not personal." The words stung more than Jessica's original comments had. At least Jessica's cruelty had been honest, born from genuine prejudice and fear. Marcus's explanation was worse, a careful reframing that made her the oversensitive one, the old woman who couldn't handle a professional discussion about age demographics. "I see," Zuri said carefully, sipping her coffee to buy time. "So when she suggested I'd be better off in a senior center with people my own age, that was just professional analysis?" Marcus winced. "She didn't mean it like that. She was just saying that maybe you'd enjoy activities designed for people with similar life experiences." "And when she called me ancient? That was—" Marcus struggled, his discomfort visible in every line of his body. "That was unfortunate word choice." But Mom, you have to understand, Jessica's generation uses language differently. Ancient doesn't necessarily mean what it meant when we were kids. Zuri felt something cold settle in her stomach. Her own son was gaslighting her, rewriting the evening's events to protect his fiancée's reputation and his own comfort. The realization was more devastating than Jessica's comments had been. "I think I understand perfectly," she said quietly. "Would you like some breakfast? I was just about to make something." "Actually, I can't stay long. I have a conference call at 10. Marcus glanced at his watch, relief flickering across his features. "But I wanted to make sure you weren't upset about anything." "Of course not," Zuri lied smoothly, "though I should probably charge my phone. It died during the night." She retrieved her phone from the bedroom, plugging it into the charger Marcus had brought her years ago, a gesture that now felt painfully ironic. As the device powered on, notifications began cascading across the screen like a digital waterfall. Message after message, comment after comment, heart after heart. Marcus glanced over as she set the phone on the counter. "Wow, your phone's really blowing up. Are you okay? Did something happen?" "It's probably just spam," Zuri said, but her voice caught slightly as she saw the numbers. Her sweet potato casserole video had crossed the 1 million view mark overnight, with engagement rates that would make any marketing professional weep with envy. "That's a lot of spam," Marcus observed, moving closer to look at the screen. "Are you sure you're not?" His words died as he saw the TikTok notification at the top of the screen. At Grandmiss Pilstee 1. 2M views, 87K likes, 12K comments. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the screen, his brain struggling to process information that didn't fit his understanding of reality. His mother, who he just finished explaining was the victim of unfortunate generational misunderstanding, apparently had a TikTok account with numbers that dwarfed anything he'd ever achieved online. "Mom," he said slowly, "what is at Grandma's Pilstee?" Zuri's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her phone, but her voice was steady. "It's my TikTok account. Your TikTok account." Marcus repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. "You have a TikTok account." "I do. With over 1 million views on a video. It appears so." Marcus pulled out his own phone, his fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone trying to disprove what he was seeing. He searched for it Grandma's Pilstee, and his face went pale as the profile loaded. 1 million followers. Video after video of his mother, his supposedly technologically challenged mother, creating content that was polished, engaging, and remarkably sophisticated. 2 million followers, he whispered, scrolling through her content. "Mom, you have 2 million followers." 2.1 million, actually, Zuri corrected, surprised by how good it felt to finally speak the truth. "Though it fluctuates." Marcus clicked on her latest video, the sweet potato casserole tutorial she'd filmed yesterday. His mother's face filled the screen, vibrant and confident, speaking directly to the camera with the natural charisma of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. The production quality was professional. Good lighting, clear audio, multiple camera angles. "This is you," he said, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. "This is really you. Did you think I'd hired a body double? I don't. I mean, how? When did you learn to do this?" He gestured helplessly at the screen. "You have ring lights. You have editing software. You have a whole setup." "I've been doing this for 3 years, Zuri said, settling into her chair with the calm dignity of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "I started during the lockdown when I was feeling isolated and lonely. I thought maybe I could connect with a few people, share some recipes, maybe some stories about your father." Marcus continued scrolling, his expression cycling through amazement, confusion, and something that might have been pride. These comments. "Mom, people love you. They really love you." "It's been a wonderful surprise," Zuri said, watching her son discover the person she'd been hiding for 3 years. "I never expected it to grow like this." "But why didn't you tell us? Why keep it secret?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to address. Zuri chose her words carefully. I suppose I thought you'd find it undignified. A woman my age, making videos on social media. I thought you'd worry about my privacy, my safety. I thought you'd try to protect me from it." Marcus flinched at the accuracy of her assessment. "We might have had concerns, but Mom, this is incredible. You've built something amazing here." "Have I?" Zuri's voice carried a note of challenge. "Because last night, Jessica spent considerable time explaining why people my age can't understand technology or social media. She suggested I'd be overwhelmed by the pace of change, that I should stick to age-appropriate activities with people my own generation." The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications hit him. His mother hadn't just been the victim of Jessica's condescension. She'd been listening to lectures about technological incompetence while secretly running a more successful digital presence than most people half her age. "Oh God," he whispered. "She doesn't know, does she?" "No one knows except you," Zuri said. "Well, and Frank." "Frank?" "Frank Rodriguez. He's a fellow creator. We collaborate sometimes." She pulled up Frank's profile, showing his own impressive following. "He's 78 and makes the most beautiful cooking videos. We've been planning a cross-cultural collaboration series." Marcus stared at the screen, his worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. "You've been living a completely different life, and we had no idea." "Not different," Zuri corrected. "Fuller. I'm still your mother, still the same person you've always known. I just happen to also be someone who understands social media better than your fiancé gives me credit for." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Marcus buried his face in his hands, the full weight of the evening's irony crashing down on him. "She was lecturing you about social media marketing. She was explaining engagement patterns and demographic targeting to someone with 2 million followers." 2.1 million, Zuri corrected again, unable to suppress a small smile. "This is insane," Marcus said, looking up at her with new eyes. "Do you know what these numbers mean in Jessica's world? She's been trying to get her biggest client to 1 million followers for 2 years. She'd kill for engagement rates like yours." "I imagine the numbers are quite good," Zuri said with studied casualness, "though I've never focused much on the business side of things." "The business side?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Mom, you could be making serious money from this. Sponsorships, brand partnerships, merchandise. You're sitting on a gold mine." "It's not about the money," Zuri said, though she was secretly pleased by his recognition of her success. "It's about connection. About showing people that life doesn't end at any particular age. About proving that we all have something valuable to offer, regardless of when we were born." Marcus continued scrolling through her videos, his amazement growing with each new discovery. "This one has 3 million views. 3 million people watched you talk about dating after 60. "That was a particularly popular topic," Zuri acknowledged. "Lots of people are navigating relationships later in life. And this one about social media etiquette for seniors has 2.5 million views." "Ironic, isn't it?" Marcus looked up at her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time in years. Not the elderly mother who needed protection and gentle handling, but the accomplished woman who'd built something remarkable while he'd been worrying about her loneliness and isolation. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for last night, for not seeing who you really are, for making assumptions about what you're capable of." "You don't need to apologize for Jessica's behavior," Zuri said, though the words came out more pointed than she'd intended. "Yes, I do," Marcus said firmly. "I should have defended you. I should have shut down those comments the moment they started. Instead, I tried to smooth things over, to make excuses for cruelty." "And why do you think that was?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Because part of me believed she was right," he admitted. "Not about you being ancient or irrelevant, but about the technology gap. I thought of you as someone who needed help with computers, who was struggling to adapt to the modern world. I was patronizing you without even realizing it. And what do you think now?" "I think you're the most tech-savvy person I know," Marcus said with a shaky laugh. "I think you've been running circles around all of us while we were busy trying to protect you from a world you've already conquered." Zuri felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. This was what she'd been craving. Not just recognition of her success, but acknowledgement of her capability, her relevance, her continued growth as a person. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "About Jessica, I mean. Are you going to tell her?" Zuri considered the question, thinking about the draft video still saved on her phone, the one that would expose Jessica's prejudices to the world in the most devastating way possible. "I'm not sure yet. What do you think I should do?" "I think," Marcus said slowly, "that the truth has a way of coming out eventually. And I think Jessica needs to confront her assumptions about age and relevance before she makes any more comments that reveal her ignorance. Even if it embarrasses her?" "Even then," Marcus said. "Maybe especially then. Some lessons can only be learned through humility." Zuri nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Having Marcus see her for who she truly was, having his support for whatever came next, gave her the courage to step fully into her power. "There's something else," she said, pulling up her direct messages. "Frank has been suggesting we meet in person. He lives in San Antonio, about 4 hours away. He wants to collaborate on a video series about love and dating after 70. Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Are you interested in him? Romantically, I mean?" "I'm interested in possibility," Zuri said carefully. "I'm interested in not letting other people's assumptions about what's appropriate for someone my age limit my choices." "Then I think you should go for it," Marcus said. "All of it. The collaboration, the relationship, whatever makes you happy. You've earned the right to live your life on your own terms." As they sat in the kitchen where she'd once bandaged his scraped knees and helped him with homework, Zuri felt the relationship between them shifting into something new. Not mother and child, but two adults who respected each other's capabilities and choices. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "With Jessica, with us, with everything?" "Now," Zuri said, looking at her phone where notifications continued to pour in from people around the world who found value in her voice. "I decide whether I'm ready to stop hiding who I am. Whether I'm ready to show everyone, including Jessica, what ancient really looks like." The decision hung between them like a promise, or a threat, depending on your perspective. Either way, the quiet widow who'd served dinner in her mother's china was about to step aside at Grandma Spilsty, and the world was about to discover what happened when assumptions met reality. The text from Marcus arrived at 4:47 p.m., just as Zuri was adjusting her ring lights for an evening video. "Jessica wants to have dinner again tomorrow. She feels bad about how last night went and wants to make it right. I told her you'd love to see her, 6 p.m., okay?" Zuri stared at the message for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. The irony was exquisite. Jessica feeling bad about comments she'd made to someone she assumed was technologically incompetent, while that same person sat in a professionally equipped home studio, managing a social media empire that dwarfed Jessica's professional achievements. She typed back, "Of course, dear. I'll make something special." But as she sent the message, Zuri felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow's dinner would be different from last night's humiliation. The question was how different she was prepared to make it. Her phone buzzed with a FaceTime call from Frank, his weathered face appearing on screen with a smile that made her heart skip in a way she'd thought was reserved for her youth. "Evening, beautiful," he said, his voice carrying the warmth that had made their online friendship blossom into something deeper. "How are you holding up after yesterday?" "It's been an interesting day," Zuri said, settling into her chair with the phone propped against her ring light. "Marcus discovered my account this morning." Frank's eyebrows rose. "How did that go?" "Better than expected. He was shocked, of course, but also proud, I think. He finally sees me as more than just his aging mother who needs protection." "And the young woman who was so dismissive?" "She's coming back tomorrow night. Marcus says she wants to make amends." Zuri's voice carried a note of dry humor. "She has no idea what she's walking into." Frank leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm not sure yet," Zuri admitted. "Part of me wants to let her apologize, accept gracefully, and move on. The other part of me thinks some lessons can only be learned through complete humility." And what does your heart tell you? Zuri considered the question, thinking about the draft video still saved on her phone, the one that would expose Jessica's prejudices to the world. My heart tells me that I'm tired of hiding who I am to make other people comfortable. I'm tired of being seen as less than what I am. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding, Frank said gently. You've built something remarkable, Zuri. You've proven that age is just a number, that relevance isn't determined by when you were born. Why should you diminish that to spare someone's feelings, especially someone who showed you no such consideration? After ending the call, Zuri sat in the gathering darkness of her home office, surrounded by the tools of her secret trade. The ring lights cast dramatic shadows across her face, and for a moment, she felt like an actress preparing for the role of a lifetime. Tomorrow night, she would either continue playing the part of the harmless elderly mother, or she would step fully into her power as at Grand Mespilsti. She opened her laptop and began preparing for what might be the most important performance of her life. The next evening, Zuri stood in her kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a meal that would have impressed any restaurant critic. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was preparing what might be Jessica's last comfortable dinner in this house, using recipes that had collectively been viewed by millions of people around the world. She'd spent the afternoon in careful preparation, not just of the food but of herself. Her makeup was flawless, her silver hair styled in soft waves that caught the light perfectly. She wore a vintage dress that had once belonged to her mother, paired with jewelry that spoke of quiet elegance. To the casual observer, she looked like any well-dressed elderly woman preparing for company. But hidden throughout the house were subtle signs of her double life, placed with the strategic precision of someone who had spent 30 years managing teenagers. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, TikTok analytics visible on the screen. A ring light stood partially assembled in the corner, looking like nothing more than a photographer's equipment to someone who didn't know better. And on her phone, carefully positioned where it would be easily visible, were the notifications from her latest video, the one that had already garnered 800,000 views in 6 hours. Marcus arrived first, his face tight with nervous energy. He'd spent the day grappling with the revelation of his mother's secret life, and the weight of that knowledge showed in every line of his body. "How do you want to handle this?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "I want to see what Jessica has to say," Zuri replied calmly. "I want to hear her apology and judge for myself whether it's genuine or just an attempt to smooth things over. And if it's not genuine, then she'll learn something about assumptions," Zuri said, her tone carrying the quiet authority that had once intimidated school board members. One way or another, Jessica arrived precisely on time, bearing a bouquet of flowers that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Her smile was practiced and professional, the kind she used in client meetings when she needed to project sincerity. "Zuri, thank you so much for having me back," she said, her voice carrying carefully modulated warmth. "I brought these for you. I hope you like lilies." "They're beautiful, thank you," Zuri replied, accepting the flowers with genuine grace. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." As they settled into the living room, Jessica's eyes swept the space with the same assessing gaze she'd used the night before. But this time, Zuri watched her carefully, noting the way her gaze lingered on the laptop screen, the slight furrow in her brow as she tried to process what she was seeing. "I wanted to talk about last night," Jessica began, her voice taking on the tone of someone who'd rehearsed this speech. "I think there might have been some miscommunication, and I'd hate for you to think I was being dismissive of your experiences." "Miscommunication," Zuri repeated, her voice neutral. "How so?" "Well, when I was talking about generational differences in technology adoption, I think it might have sounded like I was suggesting you weren't capable of understanding modern platforms. That wasn't my intention at all." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, recognizing the careful language of someone rewriting history. This wasn't an apology. It was a corporate speak deflection that placed the blame on Zuri's interpretation rather than Jessica's words. "I see," Zuri said carefully. "And what about your suggestion that I'd be better off in a senior center with people my own age?" "I was just thinking about community," Jessica said, her smile never wavering. "Sometimes it's nice to be around people who share similar life experiences, you know? I didn't mean to imply that you couldn't handle other environments." "And when you called me ancient?" Jessica's composure flickered for just a moment. That was poor word choice. I meant it more in the sense of experienced, wise, like an ancient tree that's seen many seasons. The metaphor was so patronizing that Zuri felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly. Marcus made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh or a groan. I appreciate the clarification, Zuri said, rising from her chair. Let me just check on dinner. In the kitchen, she allowed herself a moment of decision. Jessica's apology had been everything she'd expected. A carefully crafted piece of rhetoric designed to absolve guilt without admitting wrongdoing. There was no genuine remorse, no recognition of the harm her words had caused, no acknowledgement of her own prejudices. Zuri looked at her laptop screen, where the analytics from her latest video painted a picture of global engagement that would make any marketing executive weep with envy. She thought about Frank's words from the night before, about the importance of not hiding who she was to make others comfortable. She made her decision. "Dinner's ready," she called, her voice carrying a new note of anticipation. They gathered around the dining room table, where Zuri had laid out a feast that showcased her culinary skills. The conversation flowed smoothly at first, with Jessica complimenting the food and Marcus trying to maintain the peace. But as the evening progressed, Jessica's true nature began to emerge again. Emboldened by what she perceived as successful damage control, she began offering helpful suggestions about how Zuri might modernize her approach to various things. "You know, Zuri, if you're interested in staying connected with people, there are some great apps designed specifically for seniors," Jessica said, cutting her salmon into precise pieces. "They're much simpler than the regular social media platforms, with bigger fonts and easier navigation." "That's thoughtful of you," Zuri replied, her voice carefully controlled. "Though I have to say I've been managing pretty well with the regular platforms." Jessica's laugh was light and patronizing. "Oh, I'm sure you have. But these specialized apps are really designed with your generation in mind. They take into account things like slower processing speeds, difficulty with small text, confusion about privacy settings, all the challenges that naturally come with aging." Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. "Jessica, I don't think—" "It's fine, Marcus," Zuri said, her voice carrying a new edge that made both younger people look at her sharply. "I'm curious to hear more about Jessica's expertise in this area." "Well, I work with brands that target different demographics," Jessica said, warming to her subject. "And the data is very clear about the challenges older adults face with technology adoption. The learning curve is steep, the interfaces are often too complex, and there's always the risk of security breaches because people your age are more vulnerable to scams and misinformation." "Interesting," Zuri said, pulling her phone closer. "And what kind of engagement numbers do you typically see with those specialized senior apps?" "Oh, they're not really about numbers," Jessica said dismissively. "They're about creating safe spaces where people can interact at their own pace, without the pressure of trying to keep up with influencers and content creators who actually understand how to use these platforms effectively." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Zuri felt the moment crystallize around her, the point of no return where she would either accept Jessica's condescension or reveal the truth that would change everything. "You know, Jessica," she said, her voice taking on the tone that had once commanded respect from hundreds of teenagers. "I think you might be surprised by what some people my age are capable of." "I'm sure I would be," Jessica agreed, her tone suggesting she found the very idea charming. "But let's be realistic about the limitations. Someone who's 75 probably learned to use a computer when they were already in their 60s. The technological literacy just isn't there, and that's not their fault. It's just a fact of generational differences." "Generational differences," Zuri repeated, picking up her phone. "Tell me, Jessica, what would you consider impressive numbers for someone in social media?" Jessica's eyebrows rose at the unexpected question. "Impressive how? For engagement? Followers? Revenue?" "Let's start with followers." "Well, for someone just starting out, maybe 10,000 would be good. For someone established, 100,000 is respectable. 1 million followers is genuinely impressive. That's serious influence. And what about 2 million? Jessica's expression shifted, becoming more professional. 2 million is exceptional. That's serious celebrity territory, major brand partnership potential. Why? Zuri turned her phone screen toward Jessica, showing her TikTok profile with its 1 million followers clearly visible. Because that's what this ancient, technologically illiterate woman has managed to build in 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally a dawning horror as she realized the implications of what she was seeing. That's not possible, she whispered, leaning forward to look at the screen more closely. At Grandma spills tea, Zuri said calmly. Perhaps you've heard of her. Jessica's face went pale as she recognized the handle. At Grandma Spills Tea was famous in social media circles, a viral sensation whose content regularly appeared in marketing case studies about authentic engagement and cross-generational appeal. You're at Grandma Spills Tea, Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're actually at Grandma Spills Tea. I am, Zuri confirmed, the same ancient woman who couldn't possibly understand technology, who should stick to age-appropriate activities with people her own age. Marcus watched the exchange with fascination and growing satisfaction. This was better than any revenge video could have been. Jessica discovering in real time that every assumption she'd made was not just wrong, but spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. But how? Jessica stammered. I mean, your content is it's so professional. The production quality, the editing, the engagement strategies. Are you saying you're surprised that someone my age could produce quality content? Zuri asked, her tone deceptively mild. No, I mean... Jessica struggled to find words that wouldn't further incriminate her. I study social media for a living. I know how hard it is to build an audience like this. Most people half your age can't achieve what you've achieved. And yet you spent last evening explaining to me why people my age can't understand modern technology, Zuri said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had finally claimed her full power. You suggested I needed specialized apps with bigger fonts and simpler interfaces. You said I was ancient, out of touch, overwhelmed by the pace of change. Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound, her professional composure completely shattered. She was facing the marketing equivalent of a nightmare, discovering that she'd insulted someone whose influence dwarfed her own, whose understanding of her field surpassed her wildest expectations. Zuri, I had no idea, she finally managed. I never would have, if I'd known. If you'd known what? Zuri asked, her voice sharp with challenge. If you'd known I was successful, if you'd known I had more followers than your biggest client, would that have changed how you treated me? That's not. I mean... Because the woman you dismissed last night is the same woman sitting here today, Zuri continued, her years of educational leadership showing in every word. The only thing that's changed is your knowledge of my accomplishments. So I have to ask, do you respect me now because of who I am, or because of what I've achieved? The question hung in the air like a sword, cutting through Jessica's carefully constructed defenses and exposing the ugly truth of her prejudices. She had dismissed Zuri not based on her character or capabilities, but solely on her age. And now she was scrambling to reconcile that dismissal with the evidence of Zuri's extraordinary success. I think I need to go, Jessica said, her voice small and shaken. I need to think about this. I think that's a good idea, Zuri said, her tone carrying the finality of a classroom dismissal. Take all the time you need. As Jessica gathered her things and fled, Marcus sat in stunned silence, watching his mother reclaim her power with the grace and authority of a queen ascending her throne. The ancient woman Jessica had dismissed had just delivered a masterclass in dignity, strength, and the power of truth. Mom, Marcus said finally, his voice filled with awe and pride. That was incredible. That, Zuri replied, checking her phone where notifications continued to pour in from her millions of devoted followers, was just the beginning. The silence that followed Jessica's hasty departure felt different from the quiet that usually settled over Zuri's house in the evenings. This wasn't the peaceful stillness of contentment, but the charged atmosphere that follows a thunderstorm, electric, unsettled, full of potential energy waiting to discharge. Marcus sat at the dining table, his hands wrapped around his wine glass, staring at the space where Jessica had been sitting just moments before. The entire evening felt surreal, like watching a carefully orchestrated demolition where his mother had systematically dismantled every assumption his fiancée had made about her capabilities. "I should probably go after her," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "Should you?" Zuri asked, beginning to clear the table with the methodical precision of someone who had hosted thousands of dinners over the decades. "What would you say to her?" Marcus considered the question, his mind racing through possibilities. What could he say? That his mother had been right to humiliate Jessica? That Jessica had deserved the public revelation of her ignorance? That he was proud of his mother's success but disappointed in his fiancée's prejudices? "I don't know," he admitted. "I honestly don't know what to say to either of you right now." "Then perhaps you shouldn't say anything yet," Zuri suggested, carrying dishes to the kitchen. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen after we've had time to process what we've learned." But even as she spoke, Zuri could feel the weight of consequences beginning to settle around her. The satisfaction of Jessica's shocked retreat was already giving way to more complex emotions. Concern about the impact on Marcus's relationship, worry about family dynamics, and a growing awareness that her secret was now out in the open in ways she couldn't control. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Marcus texted me. He said something happened with Jessica and your secret project. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" Before Zuri could respond, another message appeared, this one from Jessica herself. "I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I need time to process this. Please don't post anything about tonight." The request was telling. Jessica's first concern wasn't about the hurt she'd caused or the relationship damage she'd inflicted, but about potential social media exposure. Even in her moment of humiliation, she was thinking about damage control and reputation management. Zuri showed the message to Marcus, who shook his head in disgust. "She's worried about her image," he said. "After everything that happened tonight, she's concerned about you posting something that might make her look bad." "Well, she's not wrong to be concerned," Zuri said, pulling up the draft video she'd created days ago, the one that would expose Jessica's prejudices to her millions of followers. "I did consider sharing my perspective on recent events." Marcus looked at the screen, seeing his mother's face frozen in an expression of quiet fury. "What does it say?" "It tells the truth about what happened. About being dismissed as ancient and irrelevant by someone who works in social media marketing. About the assumptions people make based on age. About the irony of being lectured about technology by someone who couldn't recognize actual digital success when it was sitting across the dinner table from her. Are you going to post it?" "I don't know," Zuri admitted. "Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks Jessica needs to face the consequences of her actions publicly. She hurt me, Marcus. She tried to diminish me, to put me in a box labeled, quote, elderly and, quote, irrelevant. She suggested I didn't belong in the modern world. But I also know that posting this video would destroy her professionally. It would make her a cautionary tale, a meme, a symbol of ageist prejudice. Is that justice or revenge?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question, what's the difference? Justice teaches. Revenge destroys, Zuri said, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had spent decades helping young people navigate the consequences of their choices. The question is whether Jessica is capable of learning from this experience, or whether she needs to be made an example of for others. Before Marcus could respond, Zuri's phone rang. Frank's name appeared on the screen, and she answered with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I saw your message about tonight," Frank said, his voice carrying concern. "How did it go?" "Better than expected and worse than I hoped," Zuri replied. "She revealed herself to be exactly who I thought she was, but Marcus is caught in the middle, and I'm not sure what comes next." "Are you okay?" "I'm processing," Zuri said, aware that Marcus was listening to every word. I'm trying to decide whether to let this stay private or make it a teachable moment for a broader audience. What does your heart tell you? My heart tells me that I'm tired of being underestimated. But my brain tells me that destroying someone's career might not be the answer, even if they deserve it. Maybe there's a middle path, Frank suggested. Maybe there's a way to address the issue without making it personal. After ending the call, Zuri sat with her phone in her hands, scrolling through the hundreds of notifications that had accumulated throughout the evening. Her followers were active, engaged, sharing their own stories of being dismissed or underestimated. The community she'd built was vast and supportive, but it was also powerful, capable of swift and decisive action when they perceived injustice. "Mom," Marcus said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." Zuri looked up from her phone, noting the serious expression on her son's face. "I've been thinking about this all day, ever since I discovered your account," he continued. "I realized that I've been part of the problem. Not as obviously as Jessica, but in subtler ways. I've been treating you like someone who needed protection instead of someone who is capable of taking care of herself." "Marcus, no, let me finish," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I've been making decisions about your life without consulting you, worrying about your loneliness without asking if you were actually lonely, assuming you needed help with technology when you clearly didn't. I've been patronizing you without even realizing it." Zuri felt tears prick at her eyes. This was the conversation she'd been hoping for, the recognition she'd been craving. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Marcus continued. "I'm proud of what you've built, proud of who you've become since Dad died. But I'm also ashamed of how I've seen you, how I've limited my understanding of who you are based on my own assumptions about aging and capability." "Thank you," Zuri said softly. "That means more to me than you know." "So what do you want to do about Jessica?" Zuri considered the question, weighing her options. She could post the video and watch Jessica's career implode in real time. She could keep the evening private and let Jessica live with the knowledge of her mistake. Or she could find a way to turn this experience into something constructive. "I want to talk to her," she said finally. "Not to humiliate her further, but to understand where her attitudes come from. I want to know if she's capable of growth, or if she's just someone who sees age as a limitation to be managed. And if she's not capable of growth, then I'll decide whether the world needs to hear about this," Zuri said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had made her decision. "But I want to give her the chance to prove she's better than her worst moment." Marcus nodded, understanding the wisdom in his mother's approach. "What about us? About my relationship with her?" "That's for you to decide," Zuri said. "But I will say this. You deserve to be with someone who sees value in the people you love, who doesn't dismiss them based on superficial characteristics. You deserve someone who would defend your family, not diminish them." As Marcus left that evening, Zuri felt the weight of her decision settling around her. She would reach out to Jessica, offer her a chance at redemption, an opportunity to understand the impact of her words and actions. But she would also be prepared to show the world what happened when assumptions met reality. She opened her laptop and began typing, not a video script for public consumption, but a private message to Jessica. "I imagine tonight was difficult for you. Discovering that your assumptions about me were wrong, that the person you dismissed as ancient and irrelevant has achieved more in the digital space than most people half my age. I'm not reaching out to gloat or to demand another apology. I'm reaching out because I believe people can grow, can learn from their mistakes, can become better versions of themselves. I want to understand where your attitudes about aging come from. I want to know if you're capable of seeing past the surface to the person underneath. Because right now, I'm sitting on a story that could teach the world about the dangers of ageist assumptions, and I'm trying to decide whether that story should include your name or remain a general lesson about respect and recognition. You have 24 hours to decide who you want to be in this situation. Someone who learns and grows, or someone who becomes a cautionary tale. The choice is yours." She sent the message before she could second-guess herself, then sat back in her chair, surrounded by the tools of her digital empire. Tomorrow, she would know whether Jessica Martinez was capable of growth, or whether she would become another example of what happened when prejudice met consequence. Either way, Zuri Hayden, at Grandma's Pilsti, retired principal, widow, and secret social media sensation, was no longer hiding who she was. The ancient woman Jessica had dismissed was about to show the world what true power looked like. But first, she would give her one last chance to prove she deserved mercy instead of justice. The next 24 hours would determine whether this story ended with redemption or revelation, with growth or consequences, with understanding or a very public lesson about the dangers of underestimating people based on when they were born. Zuri closed her laptop and prepared for bed, but sleep felt unlikely. Tomorrow would bring answers, and depending on what those answers revealed, it might also bring the most important video she'd ever made. The ancient woman was about to teach the world what happened when assumptions met reality, one way or another. 22 hours had passed since Zuri sent her message to Jessica, and the silence was deafening. Zuri found herself checking her phone more frequently than usual, watching for the response that would determine the trajectory of the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The numbers on her latest videos continued to climb. Her sweet potato casserole tutorial had crossed 1.5 million views, with comments pouring in from viewers who had no idea their beloved at Grandma's Pilsti was sitting in judgment of someone who had dismissed her as ancient and irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Jessica remained silent, Zuri's community continued to grow and engage, sharing stories of their own experiences with ageism, celebrating her wisdom, and proving daily that relevance had nothing to do with birth year, and everything to do with authenticity and value. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Still haven't heard the full story about what happened with Jessica. Marcus is being evasive. Are you okay?" Before Zuri could respond, another notification appeared, this one from an unexpected source. Zoe Kim, the 22-year-old college student who had been following her content for months, had sent a direct message. "Hey, at Grandma's Pilsti. I hope this isn't too forward, but I noticed some weird comments on your videos lately. People making nasty remarks about age and relevance. Just wanted you to know that your content means the world to me, and millions of others. Don't let the haters get you down." Zuri's heart constricted as she realized the implications. Jessica's friends and colleagues, the ones who had heard Jessica's twisted version of events, were apparently taking their campaign digital, targeting her social media presence with the kind of coordinated harassment that could destroy smaller creators. She scrolled through the comments on her recent videos, finding the poisonous threads Zoe had mentioned. Anonymous accounts with newly created profiles were leaving comments like, "attention-seeking old woman," "family manipulator," and, quote, "fake influencer riding the sympathy wave." The comments were sophisticated enough to avoid platform moderation, but cruel enough to sting. Her phone rang, Frank's name appearing on the screen like a lifeline. "I've been monitoring your comments," he said, without preamble. "Someone's organized a harassment campaign against you. This isn't random trolling. This is coordinated and targeted." "I know," Zuri said, her voice heavy with the weight of realization. "I think I know who's behind it. The young woman from the other night?" Her network, her friends, her colleagues, people in her industry who've heard her version of events. Zuri felt a familiar anger building in her chest. Not the hot fury of the moment, but the cold, calculating rage of someone who had been systematically attacked. "They're trying to destroy my reputation to protect hers. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give her exactly 2 more hours to respond to my message," Zuri said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made a decision. "And then I'm going to show the world what happens when you try to silence someone by attacking their life's work." After ending the call, Zuri sat in her home office, surrounded by the tools of her digital empire, watching as her comment sections filled with increasingly vicious attacks. These weren't random internet trolls. These were marketing professionals, social media managers, and digital influencers who understood exactly how to weaponize online harassment. But what they didn't understand was that Zuri had spent 30 years managing teenagers, dealing with angry parents, and navigating the politics of educational administration. She had faced down school boards, hostile media, and budget committees. A coordinated social media attack was just another Tuesday for someone with her background. She opened her laptop and began crafting what would either be Jessica's salvation or her destruction, depending on how the next 2 hours played out. The video began with Zuri sitting in her usual spot, her ring lights casting their familiar warm glow across her face. But instead of her typical upbeat demeanor, her expression was serious, authoritative, the face of someone who had been pushed too far. "My beautiful souls," she began, her voice carrying a gravity that would immediately signal to her regular viewers that something significant was happening. "Today I want to talk about something that affects all of us. What happens when we challenge other people's assumptions about who we are and what we're capable of?" She paused, letting the weight of her words settle before continuing. "A few nights ago, I had dinner with someone who spent the evening explaining to me why people my age are out of touch, technologically illiterate, and better suited to activities with people our own generation. This person, who works in social media marketing, told me I was ancient and suggested I should be in a senior center rather than trying to navigate the modern world." The video was masterful in its construction, never mentioning Jessica by name, but providing enough detail that anyone in the marketing industry would be able to identify her. Zuri's tone remained measured, dignified, but the content was devastating. "The interesting thing about assumptions," she continued, "is that they often say more about the person making them than the person being judged. When someone tells you that you're too old to understand technology, they're really telling you that they can't imagine growing and learning beyond a certain age. When they suggest you're irrelevant, they're revealing their own fears about aging and obsolescence." She held up her phone, showing the harassment comments that had been flooding her videos. "Today, I woke up to find my comment sections filled with coordinated attacks on my character, my authenticity, and my right to exist in digital spaces. Anonymous accounts calling me a fake influencer, and attention-seeking old woman. Professional marketing accounts suggesting I'm manipulating my family for content." Her voice hardened slightly, carrying the edge of someone who had been pushed beyond their limit. "What these attackers don't understand is that I didn't build this community to prove anything to anyone. I built it because I had something to offer: wisdom, experience, humor, and the radical idea that life doesn't end at any particular age. I built it because I refuse to accept other people's limitations on my potential." She leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera with the intensity of someone delivering a crucial lesson. "To the young marketing professional who called me ancient, your assumptions about age and capability say more about your own insecurities than they do about my limitations. To the people coordinating attacks on my content, you've just proven that you see older adults as threats to be silenced rather than voices to be heard. And to my beautiful community of followers, thank you for showing me that respect isn't about age. It's about authenticity, kindness, and the courage to be yourself in a world that constantly tries to put you in boxes." The video was perfect, devastating without being cruel, powerful without being vindictive. It would generate millions of views, spark countless discussions about ageism in digital spaces, and almost certainly end Jessica's career in social media marketing. But it would also position Zuri as a champion of older adults' rights, a voice for the underestimated, and a symbol of resilience in the face of discrimination. Her finger hovered over the post button as she watched the clock tick toward her self-imposed deadline. 1 hour and 47 minutes remained of Jessica's window for redemption. Then her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Mom, Jessica wants to come over. She says she has something important to tell you. Can I bring her by in an hour?" Zuri stared at the message, her heart racing. Jessica had waited until the last possible moment, but she was finally ready to respond. The question was whether she was coming to apologize or to make demands, to seek redemption, or to try to negotiate her way out of consequences. She saved the video as a draft and responded to Marcus, "Of course, I'll be here." But as she prepared for what might be the most important conversation of this entire ordeal, Zuri felt the weight of power settling around her shoulders. She had the ability to end Jessica's career with a single post, to make her a cautionary tale about the dangers of ageist assumptions. She also had the ability to offer grace, to choose education over destruction, to model the kind of wisdom that her millions of followers expected from her. The doorbell rang exactly 1 hour later. Through the window, Zuri could see Marcus and Jessica on her front porch, both looking as if they were approaching a firing squad. Jessica's usual polished appearance was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup was minimal, and she clutched a manila folder in her hands like a shield. "Thank you for seeing me," Jessica said as soon as Zuri opened the door. Her voice was smaller than it had been during their previous encounters, stripped of its professional polish and confident authority. They settled in the living room, the same space where Jessica had delivered her cruel assessments just days before. But the power dynamic had shifted completely. Jessica sat on the edge of the couch like a student called to the principal's office, while Zuri occupied her chair with the quiet authority of someone who held all the cards. "I got your message," Jessica began, her voice shaking slightly. "And I've spent the last day thinking about everything that happened. Everything I said, everything I assumed." She opened the manila folder, revealing printed screenshots of Zuri's TikTok analytics, engagement metrics, and demographic data. "I did my research," Jessica continued, her professional training evident even in her vulnerability. "I studied your content, your audience, your growth patterns. Do you know what I found?" "Tell me," Zuri said, her voice neutral. "I found that you've built something I've been trying to help clients achieve for years. Your engagement rates are extraordinary, not just high, but authentic. Your audience spans every demographic, every age group, every geographic region. You've created content that resonates across generational lines in ways that most marketers can only dream of." Jessica's voice cracked slightly as she continued. "But more than that, I found that you've been doing everything right that I've been doing wrong. You've been authentic while I've been calculating. You've been generous while I've been strategic. You've been building genuine connections while I've been managing campaigns." She looked up at Zuri, her eyes red with tears she was fighting to control. "I don't know if this matters to you, but I need you to know that my comments weren't really about you. They were about my own terror of aging, my own fear of becoming irrelevant, my own desperate need to feel superior to someone, anyone, to prove that my youth had value." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way that Jessica's previous interactions had never been. "I've been so afraid of getting older, of losing my edge, of becoming one of those people who get dismissed and cast aside," Jessica continued. "And when I met you, I saw everything I was afraid of becoming. But I was wrong. I wasn't seeing you. I was seeing my own fears reflected back at me." Zuri felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of the pain beneath Jessica's cruelty. This wasn't just about ageism, it was about a young woman terrorized by the prospect of her own aging, lashing out at older adults because they represented her deepest fears. "What do you want from me?" Zuri asked, her voice gentler than it had been. "I want to learn," Jessica said simply. "I want to understand how you've maintained your relevance, your confidence, your joy, in a world that constantly tells women they expire at 30. I want to know how you've embraced aging instead of fighting it. And what are you willing to do to learn?" Jessica took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what came next. "Whatever it takes," she said. "I'll make a public apology. I'll take responsibility for the harassment campaign my colleagues have been running against your content. I'll use my platform to advocate for older adults in digital spaces. I'll do whatever you think is right." Zuri looked at the young woman sitting across from her, seeing past the polished exterior to the frightened girl underneath. Jessica Martinez, ambitious marketing executive, had been reduced to her essential self, someone desperate to learn how to age with grace instead of terror. "There's one thing I need to know," Zuri said. "Are you doing this because you genuinely want to grow, or because you're afraid of the consequences if you don't?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the gravity it deserved. "Both," she said finally. "I'm terrified of what you could do to my career. But I'm also terrified of who I'll become if I don't change. I don't want to be someone who diminishes other people to feel better about myself. I don't want to be someone who sees aging as failure instead of achievement." It was the most honest thing Jessica had said since they'd met, and Zuri felt the last of her anger begin to dissolve, replaced by something that might have been hope. Then we have work to do, she said, reaching for her phone and opening the draft video that could have destroyed Jessica's life. With deliberate precision, she deleted it. But first, Zuri continued, you need to understand that earning my forgiveness is just the beginning. You need to earn your own. The silence that followed Zuri's words stretched between them like a bridge, fragile, uncertain, but offering the possibility of crossing from one shore to another. Jessica sat motionless on the couch, her folder of research still clutched in her hands, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The woman she had dismissed as ancient and irrelevant had just chosen mercy over vengeance, education over destruction. I don't understand, Jessica said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you delete that video? You had every right to destroy me. I would have deserved it. Zuri leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Because destruction is easy, Jessica. Anyone can tear someone down. But building someone up? Teaching them to be better? That takes real strength. But I hurt you. I humiliated you in your own home. I made you feel small and irrelevant. Jessica's voice cracked with the weight of her guilt. And then my colleagues, my friends, they attacked your work, your community, everything you've built. Yes, you did all of those things, Zuri acknowledged, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. But you also did something else. You showed me exactly how much my work matters. You proved that what I've built is powerful enough to threaten people, important enough to attack, valuable enough to defend. Marcus, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. Jessica, you need to understand something about my mother. She spent her entire career believing that people can change, that mistakes can become lessons, that growth is possible at any age. She's not just giving you a second chance. She's giving you the chance to prove that her faith in human potential is justified. I don't know if I deserve that faith, Jessica said, tears finally spilling over. I've been carrying this fear of aging for so long, this terror of becoming irrelevant, that I've become cruel to the very people I should be learning from. Where does it come from? Zuri asked gently. This fear of aging? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, her professional composure completely dissolved. My mother, she said finally. She was a successful advertising executive in the 80s and 90s. Beautiful, brilliant, always ahead of the curve. But when she turned 50, the industry just discarded her. Younger executives, fresh ideas, digital natives. She went from being the person everyone wanted to work with to being the person no one returned calls to. The confession hung in the air like a weight. Zuri felt the last of her anger evaporate, replaced by a deep understanding of the wounds that had shaped Jessica's behavior. She became bitter, Jessica continued, angry at the world, at younger people, at the changes she couldn't keep up with. She spent the rest of her career fighting against obsolescence instead of embracing evolution. And I swore I would never let that happen to me. So you decided to strike first, Zuri said, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who understood the psychology of fear, to diminish older adults before they could threaten your sense of relevance. Exactly, Jessica whispered. I thought if I could prove that people your age were out of touch, irrelevant, ancient, then I could prove that I was still valuable, still needed, still safe from the same fate. But what you didn't understand, Zuri said, leaning forward, is that your mother's story doesn't have to be your story. The world she lived in, where experience was discarded for youth, where wisdom was replaced by novelty, that world is changing. The digital age has created space for voices like mine, for perspectives that couldn't find platforms before. She pulled out her phone, showing Jessica the comments section of her latest video. Look at these responses. 18-year-olds asking for advice about college, 30-year-olds seeking guidance about career changes, 60-year-olds sharing their own stories of reinvention. Age isn't dividing people anymore. Authenticity is bringing them together. Jessica stared at the screen, reading comment after comment from people across generations who found value in Zuri's content. I've been so focused on demographics, on target audiences, on age-based marketing strategies, that I missed the most important thing. People connect with truth, not birth years. That's exactly right, Zuri said. And that's the first lesson in aging with grace instead of fear. Your value isn't determined by your age. It's determined by what you contribute, how you grow, and how you choose to show up in the world. Over the next hour, the conversation transformed from confrontation to collaboration. Jessica shared her research on Zuri's content, pointing out techniques and strategies that even she, with her professional training, found impressive. Zuri explained her approach to content creation, her philosophy of authentic engagement, and her methods for building genuine community across generational lines. "Your content strategy is brilliant," Jessica said, her professional admiration evident. "You've created what we call sticky content, videos that people return to, share with others, and reference in their own lives. But more than that, you've built what every marketer dreams of, a community that feels like family." "I never thought of it in marketing terms," Zuri admitted. "I just tried to be helpful, to share what I'd learned, to offer the kind of encouragement I wished I'd had during my own difficult times." "That's exactly why it works," Jessica said, her excitement growing as she began to understand the deeper principles at play. "You're not selling anything, you're serving. You're not performing authenticity, you're living it. You're not targeting demographics, you're speaking to human experiences that transcend age." As the evening progressed, something remarkable happened. The antagonists became teacher and student, the conflict became collaboration, and the wound became a bridge. Jessica asked questions about Zuri's journey, her creative process, her relationship with her audience. Zuri shared stories about her late husband, her loneliness after his death, her discovery of her own voice in the digital age. "There's something I need to tell you," Jessica said as the conversation began to wind down, "about the harassment campaign. I didn't organize it, but I didn't stop it either. When my colleagues started attacking your content, I was glad. I thought it would somehow diminish your success, make me feel better about my own mistakes." "And how does it feel now?" Zuri asked. "Shameful," Jessica said without hesitation. "Watching them attack someone whose work I now understand and respect, it's like watching vandals destroy a museum. It's not just wrong, it's barbaric." "Then help me stop it," Zuri said simply. "Use your influence, your network, your understanding of how these campaigns work. Help me protect not just my content, but the space I've created for older adults to have their voices heard." Jessica nodded, her expression determined. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make calls, send messages, use every professional relationship I have to shut down the harassment. And I'll do it publicly so everyone knows where I stand." "That's a start," Zuri said. "But I want more from you than just damage control. I want you to help me build something." "What do you mean?" "I want you to help me create content that bridges generational divides. I want to collaborate on videos that show how different generations can learn from each other, support each other, and grow together. I want to prove that the future doesn't belong to the young or the old. It belongs to everyone who's willing to embrace both wisdom and innovation." Jessica's eyes lit up with possibility. A collaborative series. Different perspectives on the same challenges. Intergenerational mentorship. Shared wisdom. She paused, her marketing mind already spinning with ideas. This could be revolutionary, not just for content creation, but for how we think about aging, about value, about the relationship between generations. "Exactly," Zuri said. "Instead of seeing aging as decline, we present it as evolution. Instead of treating generations as competitors, we show them as collaborators. Instead of fearing obsolescence, we embrace transformation." Marcus, who had been watching this extraordinary conversation unfold, finally spoke up. "This is incredible. You're talking about changing not just how people think about aging, but how they think about growth, about learning, about the value of experience in a rapidly changing world." "It won't be easy," Zuri warned. "Jessica, you'll face criticism from people who think you're betraying your generation by collaborating with someone my age. You'll encounter resistance from colleagues who don't understand why you're advocating for older adults. You'll have to confront your own fears about aging every time we work together." "I know," Jessica said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "But I also know that what you've built is more valuable than anything I've achieved in my career. If I can learn from you, if I can help bridge the gap between generations, if I can transform my fear of aging into excitement about growth, then maybe I can become the person I want to be instead of the person I was afraid I'd become. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The woman who had dismissed Zuri as ancient and irrelevant had become someone eager to learn, to grow, to contribute to a vision of intergenerational collaboration that could change how society viewed aging and value. "There's one more thing," Zuri said as they prepared to end the evening. "I want you to meet someone. Frank Rodriguez. He's a fellow creator, a wonderful man, and someone who's also navigating the challenges of aging in the digital age. I think you'd learn a lot from his perspective." "I'd love that," Jessica said. "I want to learn from anyone who's figured out how to age with grace instead of fear." As Jessica and Marcus prepared to leave, the dynamic between all three had shifted completely. The antagonist had become an ally, the conflict had become a collaboration, and the wound had become a source of wisdom. "Thank you," Jessica said at the door, her voice carrying the weight of genuine gratitude. "For the second chance, for the lesson, for showing me that growth is possible at any age, including mine. Thank you for proving that my faith in human potential was justified," Zuri replied. "Now let's get to work changing the world's perspective on aging, one video at a time." As they drove away, Zuri felt a satisfaction that went deeper than any viral video or glowing comment. She had taken someone's worst impulses and transformed them into their best possibilities. She had turned an enemy into an ally, a wound into wisdom, a conflict into collaboration. The ancient woman Jessica had dismissed was about to become her greatest teacher, and together they were about to show the world what happened when wisdom met innovation, when experience embraced change, and when different generations chose collaboration over competition. The real work was just beginning. 6 months had passed since that pivotal evening when Jessica Martinez had sat in Zuri's living room, broken and humbled, asking to learn rather than assuming she had nothing to learn. The transformation that had begun in that moment of vulnerability had rippled outward in ways none of them could have anticipated, changing not just their individual lives but the very conversation around aging and relevance in the digital age. Zuri stood in her home office, now expanded to accommodate the professional equipment that had become necessary for her growing multimedia empire. The ring lights had been joined by professional cameras, a complete audio setup, and a backdrop system that could transform her space into whatever setting her content required. But despite the technological upgrades, the heart of her work remained unchanged. Authentic connection, genuine wisdom, and the radical proposition that life's value increased rather than decreased with age. "Are you ready for the big reveal?" Jessica's voice came through the laptop speakers, her face appearing on screen from her own studio setup in downtown Austin. The bitter, insecure woman who had once called Zuri ancient had been replaced by someone confident in her own skin, excited about the future rather than terrified of it. "As ready as I'll ever be," Zuri replied, adjusting her microphone one final time. Today marked the launch of their collaborative series, Bridges, Conversations Across Generations, a project that had grown from their initial reconciliation into something that promised to change how society viewed intergenerational relationships. The series had already generated significant buzz in marketing circles, not just for its innovative approach to content creation, but for the unlikely partnership at its heart. Jessica Martinez, once considered a rising star in youth-focused social media marketing, had pivoted her entire career toward intergenerational communication strategies. Her transformation from ageist to advocate had become a case study in professional reinvention that business schools were already incorporating into their curricula. "Frank just texted," Jessica continued, her smile bright on screen. "He's got the San Antonio Community Center set up for the live watch party. 300 people confirmed attendance, ages ranging from 16 to 92. Frank Rodriguez had become an integral part of their expanding circle, his gentle wisdom and culinary expertise adding depth to their collaborative efforts. More importantly, his relationship with Zuri had blossomed into something beautiful, a love story that proved romance wasn't reserved for the young, that passion could be discovered at any age, and that the best partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared values. Carmen's bringing the Portland viewing party online in 10 minutes, Marcus added, his voice joining the conversation from his own setup in his home office. Her son had become an unofficial producer for their content, his engineering mind perfectly suited to managing the technical aspects of their increasingly complex productions. More importantly, his relationship with both women had evolved into something grounded in mutual respect rather than protective paternalism. And Zoe's got the college campus events coordinated across 12 universities, Jessica added, referring to the young woman who had become their bridge to Gen Z audiences. Zoe Kim had emerged as a powerful voice in her own right, her perspective on intergenerational collaboration resonating with young people who were hungry for wisdom and connection in an increasingly fragmented world. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The campaign that had started with Jessica's cruel dismissal of Zuri's relevance had evolved into a movement that celebrated the value of every generation's contribution to human progress. 30 seconds to live, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who had discovered a new passion. All platforms are green, audio levels are good, and our pre-show numbers are already exceeding projections. Zuri took a deep breath, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves that preceded any major performance. But this was different from her usual videos. This was the culmination of months of work, the public declaration of a partnership that had transformed everyone involved. "Hello, beautiful souls," she began, her voice carrying the warmth that had made her a beloved figure to millions. "And welcome to something very special. 6 months ago, I had an encounter that changed my life. Not because it was pleasant, but because it was necessary. Someone I had just met made some very hurtful assumptions about who I was and what I was capable of, based entirely on my age." On screen, Jessica's face appeared alongside Zuri's, her expression serious but peaceful. "That someone was me," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her confession. "I called Zuri ancient. I suggested she was out of touch with the modern world. I recommended she limit herself to activities I considered age-appropriate. And I was wrong about everything." The vulnerability in Jessica's voice was genuine, earned through months of difficult self-reflection and genuine change. Her public apology video, released 3 months earlier, had gone viral for all the right reasons, not as a spectacle of humiliation, but as a powerful example of growth, accountability, and the possibility of redemption. "What happened next changed both of our lives," Zuri continued, her voice carrying the narrative forward. "Instead of responding with anger, though I certainly felt it, I chose to respond with curiosity. I wanted to understand where such harsh judgments came from and whether they could be transformed into something more constructive. And instead of defensive deflection, though I certainly wanted to hide," Jessica added, "I chose to confront the fear that had been driving my behavior. The terror of aging, of becoming irrelevant, of losing my value in a world that seemed to worship youth above all else." The comments section exploded with responses from viewers across the globe. The live audience numbers were climbing rapidly. 50,000, 75,000, 100,000 people tuning in to witness this unlikely collaboration between a 75-year-old retired principal and a 28-year-old marketing executive who had found common ground in their shared humanity. "What we discovered," Zuri said, "is that the fear of aging isn't really about getting older, it's about becoming irrelevant. And the key to overcoming that fear isn't to fight aging, but to embrace the ongoing process of growth and contribution that makes life meaningful at any age." Frank's face appeared on screen, his gentle smile warming the digital space. "I'm 78 years old," he said in his soft Texas drawl, "and I'm having the most creative, productive, and fulfilling years of my life. Not in spite of my age, but because of everything I've learned, experienced, and survived to get here." The conversation that followed was unlike anything in the current social media landscape. Instead of the shallow performativity that characterized most online content, this was a genuine exploration of fear, growth, and the possibility of transformation. Jessica talked about her journey from ageist to advocate, sharing the difficult process of confronting her own prejudices and fears. Zuri discussed the loneliness that had followed her husband's death, and how finding her voice online had connected her with a community she never could have imagined. "The most important thing we've learned," Jessica said, "is that every generation has something unique to offer, and something important to learn. When we stop seeing each other as competitors for relevance, and start seeing each other as collaborators in the human experience, magic happens. As if to prove her point, Zoe Kim's face appeared on screen, her young voice adding another layer to the conversation. What drew me to Zuri's content initially wasn't her age, it was her authenticity. She was speaking truths that I needed to hear, offering perspectives that helped me navigate my own challenges. Age became irrelevant when wisdom became apparent. The hour-long conversation covered everything from career transitions and relationship challenges to the role of technology in human connection and the importance of intergenerational mentorship. But what made it truly special was the genuine respect and affection visible between the participants, relationships that had been forged through conflict and strengthened through understanding. Before we wrap up, Zuri said as the program neared its end, I want to share something with our audience. Frank, would you do the honors? Frank's face filled the screen, his expression carrying a mixture of nervousness and joy that made him look decades younger. Well, I suppose there's no better time than the present, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Zuri Hayden, you've changed my life in ways I never expected. You've shown me that love can be discovered at any age, that partnership can be built on mutual respect and shared dreams, and that the best adventures often begin when we least expect them. The realization of what was happening dawned on viewers and participants alike. Frank was proposing, live on the internet, to a woman he'd met through social media collaboration, proving that authentic connection could transcend digital boundaries and that romance wasn't reserved for the young. Frank Rodriguez, Zuri said, her voice breaking with emotion, are you asking me to marry you on a live stream with 200,000 people watching? I'm asking if you'll spend the rest of your life proving that age is just a number and love has no expiration date, Frank replied, his own voice thick with tears. The comments section exploded with hearts, congratulations, and expressions of joy from viewers around the world. The proposal had been unplanned, spontaneous, and absolutely perfect, a demonstration of the authenticity that had made their collaboration so powerful. Yes, Zuri said, her face radiant with happiness. Yes, I'll marry you, Frank Rodriguez. And yes, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that the best is yet to come. As the program ended and the cameras stopped rolling, the group remained connected through their screens, sharing the joy of the moment and the satisfaction of work well done. The live viewer count had peaked at nearly 300,000, with millions more expected to watch the recorded version. But more importantly, they had accomplished something that transcended mere entertainment. They had modeled a different way of thinking about aging, relevance, and the possibility of transformation at any stage of life. That was incredible, Jessica said, her face still bright with the emotion of witnessing Frank's proposal. I never imagined that something that started with such pain could become something so beautiful. Pain often precedes growth, Zuri replied, her hand still shaking slightly from the excitement of Frank's unexpected proposal. The question is whether we're willing to do the work to transform that pain into wisdom. Speaking of work, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and amazement. The preliminary metrics are extraordinary. We've got engagement rates that most content creators can only dream of, demographic reach that spans every age group, and sentiment analysis that's overwhelmingly positive. But more than that, Carmen added, her voice joining from Portland, we've created something that actually matters. Something that changes how people think about aging, about growth, about the value of different generations working together. The series Bridges, Conversations Across Generations, would go on to become one of the most successful collaborative content projects in social media history, spawning copycat series, academic studies, and a new approach to intergenerational communication that would influence everything from marketing strategies to corporate diversity programs. But for the people who had lived through its creation, the real victory was more personal. They had taken the worst human impulses, fear, prejudice, cruelty, and transformed them into the best human possibilities, growth, understanding, love. They had proved that redemption was possible, that people could change, and that the connections between generations could be a source of strength rather than division. As they signed off from their various locations, each returned to lives that had been fundamentally changed by their shared experience. The ancient woman who had been dismissed as irrelevant had become a voice for transformation. The young marketing executive who had been driven by fear had become an advocate for wisdom. The son who had seen his mother as needing protection had become her collaborator and champion. And somewhere in the digital space they had created together, millions of people were discovering that age was just a number, that growth was possible at any stage of life, and that the best stories often began with the words, "I was wrong, and I want to learn." The revolution was just beginning. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, Zuri's backyard was alive with laughter and celebration. Her 76th birthday party had become something extraordinary, a physical manifestation of the digital community she'd built, with 3 generations gathered around tables that bridged decades of experience and wisdom. Frank adjusted his tie nervously, still amazed that at 78 he was planning a wedding to the woman who had revolutionized his understanding of love and possibility. "You ready for this, beautiful?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "I've been ready for adventure my whole life," Zuri replied, her smile radiant as she watched Jessica teach her own grandmother how to use TikTok, both women laughing as they attempted trending dance moves. The transformation was complete. Jessica's marketing firm now specialized in intergenerational campaigns, her personal growth having become professional expertise. Her relationship with Marcus had evolved too, strengthened by shared values and mutual respect for the wisdom of experience. 5 million followers, Mom, Marcus announced, showing her phone's analytics. And a book deal, a documentary in production, and speaking engagements at universities worldwide. "The numbers are lovely," Zuri said, watching as Zoe helped Carmen set up the live stream for followers who couldn't attend in person. "But this is what matters. Real connections, authentic relationships, proof that age is just the beginning of the story, not the end." As the evening wound down, she stood before her gathered family, both blood and chosen, raising her glass of champagne. "To everyone who sees potential where others see limitations," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "To bridges built from understanding, and to the radical idea that our best days are always ahead of us." The ancient woman who had been dismissed as irrelevant had become a force for transformation, proving that every ending was actually a new beginning waiting to be discovered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,